Thank you. Good morning. I'll call this meeting to order of the Desert Water Agency Board of Directors on December 19th at 8 a.m. We'll, excuse me, I'm asking for, as a housekeeping matter, that those of you that are participating virtually to please leave your speaker or mic muted until if and when you're ready to speak during public comment. Also, those of us that are in the room, if we could remember to mute your electronic devices so they don't interrupt us during the course of the meeting. I will call on directors in roll call order for discussion and questions in the following order. Director Gracia, Director Bloomer, Secretary Treasurer McKenna, Vice President Bowman, and President Ortega. And all votes will be conducted via roll call. And with that, I'll lead the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. So with that, we'll move to item number 2, which would be the roll call. Assistant Secretary Baca, please.
Present.
Director Bloomer.
Present.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Present.
Vice President Bowman.
Yep.
And President Ortega.
Present.
All present.
Thank you. Item number 3 is public comment on items not on the agenda. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to make comments that are about the business of the water agency, but are not on today's agenda. We'll ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. And I'll start with Assistant Secretary Baca. Have we received any comments via email or otherwise?
I have not received any via email, but I do see there's somebody from the public had their hand raised.
Okay. Well, we'll continue then. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. This is actually Paul Henriksen from Upper West Side neighborhood of Palm Springs. And sorry, it says Go Bananas. I've been trying to figure out how to change that name, but Ashley and others know me. First, so this is not on the agenda. First, I'd like to thank Board Member Gracia for being so generous with his time. I have been asking him a gazillion questions lately to help me better understand some things, because the city of Palm Springs has a good opportunity right now with new bridge projects. Those 2 bridge projects also bring and have designed into them the sewer system hookup sleeve engineered to the whole thing. Turns out, so we've got an opportunity to bring sewer connections to everything that's up along Garnett Road. That's south of the freeway, west of Indian Canyon, and right around that intersection. There's a lot of businesses that are on large batch systems. So it's really helpful that we can get them off of that. I want to, and I will be asking, I want to say commissioner. I meet with so many committees and commissioners, Board Member Gracia, if he can help me better understand the state's aquifer protection zone. I've been unable to find that, and I'd like to bring more attention to the city on these projects. So turns out the city already had some planned and approved projects for sewer lines to get all those businesses connected. However, the bridge projects prevented that from being possible. And they kind of had forgotten about those projects that they had. So I've already brought it up to the attention of the city. I also have brought up the attention to them about Purple Pipe and Purple Pipe Network. And I don't know where Desert Water Agency is on that. So Board Member Gracia, I'm going to be bending your ear a lot more about some of this stuff, because I really want to help the city get on track to do what they can to get these pollutants out of the aquifers. and better understanding it. So I just wanted to thank you for your time on that. Additionally, oh shoot, what was that other note? Oh well, I winged it. But if there are, I don't have a voice with the county. They don't know me, but with the city, I do. And so I'm trying to bring this attention to them. So thanks for your time and listening. And if you've got any other suggestions, please let me know because I want to bring the city's attention to this stuff. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public who would like to speak at this time on an item not on our agenda today? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item, which is 4. Again, public comment on items that are listed on our agenda. Again, we'd ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. And with that, I'll look to the audience and look to the Zoom call to see if there are any people who would like to speak publicly about an item on the agenda.
Once again, I would, but I'll make it really brief. I look at the Mission Springs Water District and the Desert Water Agency existing litigation. And I often wonder why we have 2 water districts. And as I may be wrong about this, but I understand that Mission Springs is actually inside Desert Water Agency. I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this as well. And I was wondering, is there a way for them to combine so that it would be more efficient? And if I understand correctly, Mission Springs Water District struggles a bit and has some water issues to deal with. And I was just wondering if at some point, I know you can't respond to me here, but maybe Board Member Grasha could help me better understand that. But that's just the concept that seems logical to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Unless there are any other comments, we can move on to item number 5, which is our consent calendar. We have quite a few items on the consent calendar. If there are members of the board who would like to pull from the consent calendar one or more of these items, please let us know now and we can discuss that separately. Director Grasha, do you have any?
No questions.
No? Okay. Director Bloomer?
No.
Okay. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
No.
No. And Vice President Bowman?
None from me.
Okay. None from me. So I'll
move item 5 for approval.
Thank you very much. I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. So I have a first from Director Grasha, a second from Director Bloomer, and may we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha?
Aye.
Director Bloomer?
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
Aye.
Vice President Bowman?
Aye.
And President Ortega?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So we can move to a long list of action items that we have in front of us today. Item 6A is request board action on customer appeal, Moises de la Torre. And I think that's Assistant Manager Johnson.
Thank you, President Ortega, members of the board. So back in 2019, the board adopted Resolution 1224, which was our policy on discontinuation of residential water service or non-payment. And part of that resolution addresses procedures to contest or appeal a bill. Mr. De La Torre is appealing his August 2023 water bill. I do not know if Mr. Torre I don't see him present in the audience, and I don't believe he's on Zoom. However, he does not agree with the high bill for August 2023. He checked for leaks and found none on the property and feels the meter is not accurate. So we've listed a summary of the events that deal with this appeal. It's quite lengthy. It started back in May. The water bill for his property was 4 times higher than the April bill. And that triggered our staff to do an automatic reread, which we did do the following day. We found that there was motion, and we sent a high consumption alert letter to the property to advise the customer that there may be a leak on the property, and that the meter was, we reread the meter and to have them investigate. We did not hear from the customer. Then in June, again, the water read was again about 4 times as higher than the April bill, almost about the same as May. We again reread the meter. At this time, we found no motion. And then we did hear from the customer on June 20th, asking if we could check the meter again. So our field services supervisor did go on site and reread the meter, and there was no motion on the meter. The customer then again called in July and asked if we could reread the meter again to check. So our field services supervisor did go back on site, found that there was slight motion on the meter. And what we found was that there was a automatic pool fill on the property. And if you shut that off, the motion stopped. He also performed, our supervisor performed a field test on the meter and found it to be 99% accurate. The July bill was then 37 units, which is back to about a normal average bill for the property. Then in August, the bill was 305 units. Again, we then went out, reread the meter, did find some motion, slow motion, again, sent a high consumption letter to the property. Then the customer then filed a dispute with the agency for the August bill on November 1st. A water bill dispute denial letter was mailed to the customer. It was based on the staff's previous field investigations and rereads. The customer then came into the office on November 21st. He asked to speak to the field services supervisor or the general manager, and both, however, were out of the office at the time. Our field services supervisor did contact the customer on the 22nd, or he called and there was no answer. But then the customer was able to contact the field services supervisor on the 27th. Our supervisor advised him of the appeal process. So on November 28th, the customer did file an official appeal to the board. The customer has not paid the August water bill, which was a total of $814.33. So that included $780.80 for water consumption, $33.53 for his water monthly service charge. This property also has a sewer charge associated with it for $33.25. So at this time, according to the appeal process, the fiscal impact, if the board decides to deny the appeal, there will be no fiscal impact. If the board decides to grant the appeal, the agency may credit Mr. De La Torre's account in an amount not to exceed $780.80, which is the water consumption portion of that bill. And at this time, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions for Mr. Johnson?
Has the ratepayer been in contact since November? No? Is that when the...
Not that I'm aware of that he's contacted. He has been, actually was difficult to to contact.
Right.
And you can see there were some little
Yeah.
time gaps there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wonder, is it possible if we just table this for 60 days and give him time to figure out a way back before we make a final ruling? Does that bind you guys up too much?
I guess that would be a decision on the board if
All right.
you would want to table this.
Well, let's continue with questions and then
Yep.
we can address that afterward.
Yes.
Director Bloomer.
I just have a question. Where is the property located?
It's in Cathedral City, Treasure Trail, I believe.
Okay.
And
And he has a pool. There's a pool.
there is a pool on the property.
And he didn't empty and refill his pool in August?
That's
Several
correct.
And May and June. No.
The customer did discuss the situation with our field service supervisor, said that he did check the property. According to the customer, he claimed he did not find a leak on the property. And again, he feels the meter is not accurate, and that's what's causing the situation. However, there was 2 high bills and then a low bill and then another high bill. He's not disputing the 2 higher bills in May and June or the July bill. He is disputing the August bill only.
Okay, thank you.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Well, I think on looking at his usage for this year, and it's now back to his average, it's 30 in October and 30 in September. The balance of probabilities is that this gentleman has a leak in his pool system and has fixed it. So I would be inclined to deny this appeal.
Vice President Bowman.
Yeah, when a customer claims that the meter is bad, it's my understanding that meters never fail in the side of the district, but always on the side of the customer. Is that correct?
Typically, that's what you'll find. It'll typically be a stuck meter, which will not record the usage through the meter, which again would be less water measured.
Okay. Do we know whether this property is, do people live there full time, or is it just a part-time residence, or do we have any idea about that? Would that have some impact possibly on the way water is being used there?
I do not know. I can see, just looking at the history, that it appears that it's a resident that lives there full time, just based on the history of the monthly use. I don't know if it's a rental property of that nature, but we can find out.
All right. Well, unless there are any other questions, I guess we can discuss this possibility of moving allowing the ratepayer to, have the opportunity to, did they ever indicate to you that they would actually appear today?
No, they were emailed and mailed a letter regarding this appeal process and the date and time of when this would occur. We have not heard from the customer, I believe. Is that correct, Ms. Baca?
Correct. I sent out the letter notifying them of today's board meeting, I think in the beginning of December. And the email went out to him too. And the email went out to him last week when we posted the agenda also.
Okay. Well, what's the pleasure of the board?
I'm going to make a motion to deny the appeal.
Okay. I have a first from Director Bloomer and a second from Secretary Treasurer McKenna. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Aye.
Vice President Bowman.
Aye.
And President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, we can move to the next item, 6B, which is request acceptance of Vasquez and Company LLP annual audit report for 2022 and 2023.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. This morning we have Roger Martinez. He is of Vasquez and Company LLP, and he will be presenting Vasquez's audit report on the Desert Water Agency's financial statements, financial activities for fiscal year 2022 and 2023, and will answer any questions the board may have with regard to the audit. And with that, I will pass it off to Roger.
Thank you, Ms. Sands.
Welcome.
Morning, members of the board. I'm sorry, I'm recovering from a cold, so my voice is a little bit weak today. But my name is, once again, Roger Martinez. I am the audit practice leader for Vasquez and Company. I also serve as the lead engagement partner on your audit. We have completed your audit for your fiscal year 2020-23. And I'm going over the next few minutes, I'm going to be going over our required communications, discuss the significant areas of focus during the audit, and also give you a sense on the results of our audit procedures. First of all, I want to mention that your audit is a collaborative effort. We involve members of the board, management, and it is an effort that really takes over 500 hours to complete. The audit process takes multiple months. We start planning for your audit before you conclude the fiscal year. We perform procedures, and ultimately, we present the report that you have before you. The engagement team that you have that work on your account included not only a separate quality control reviewing partner to do a co-review of the report as well as of our procedures. It also included auditors that have experience with water agencies and also IT auditors that look into your IT, into your information technology, general controls, as well as application controls. What this graph shows you is really about the audit process, and it is in that we take into consideration everything that transpired during the year. We look into changes in personnel, systems, over some of the significant transactions or events that took place. We gain an understanding of your controls, and for those controls that we determine to be significant and that we need to be relying on, we will test those controls. We then move on to test the actual account balances. And it is part of that process that we're able to provide feedback to management as well as to the board, and able to gain sufficient audit evidence to render an opinion on your financial statements. As part of the results of our procedures, both on the testing of controls, testing of details, the actual numbers themselves, we are rendering an unmodified opinion on your 2023 financial statements. And a modified opinion is the same thing as a clean opinion. It is the highest form of opinion that we can provide on the set of financial statements. We believe that your financial position, your results of operations, changes in net position, as well as your cash flows are fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Our audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards. Now, when we perform an audit, we're always thinking if something were to go wrong, where would that occur? And in our letter that we submitted to you before we started the audit, we discussed regarding the different areas of risk, but also there are just general areas of concerns just for who you are as an organization. And some of those areas are listed here, including from cash and cash equivalents. So always susceptibility to misappropriation, investments, the valuation of those investments. Do you have the rights to those investments? What is the ultimate valuation at the end of the period? Your receivables, how are you accounting for your receivables? Is it based upon your systems and the controls that you have in place for tracking? The allowances that you're setting up for the uncollectability. When it comes to your capital assets, are you following your procurement policies for the acquisition of those capital assets, how you're disposing of those assets, the recognition of potential impairments on the use of those assets. When it comes to your expenditures, expenses, payrolls, it is about that recognition, following your internal controls for expenses. Are they properly being classified? And as you can see, the results of all of these procedures, there were no material exceptions that we need to bring to your attention. In a similar fashion, it has to deal when we look at your key processes such as procurement and your liabilities. A concern when it comes to liabilities is always about the underreporting of liabilities. When it comes to assets, it's the overreporting. Those are the normal concerns that we as auditors have to look into. Once again, there were no material exceptions. Another area of concern has to deal, and this is relevant to all organizations, and is related to management override or controls. You can have the best system of controls, but if management overrides those controls, then having controls is meaningless. So we perform procedures primarily in the form of looking at your journal entries that management has posted. We look into your related party transactions, related parties, whether tied to management or members of the board. Looking if there are such transactions that could create significant risks or bypassing the controls that the organization has put in place. Now, once again, there were no such issues that we need to bring to your attention. When it comes to significant estimates, the most significant estimates that you have in your financial statements deal with your pension, your OPEB liabilities. There are actuarial calculations that go into, that are involved. And there's obviously those estimates look into a lot of different factors. Our job as auditors is to ascertain that the information that is used by the actuaries to come up with these liabilities is accurate and complete. We also look at the significant assumptions that go into those studies to make sure that they're in line with what we see with other organizations. When it comes to leases, it is about the recognition. There's GASB 87, and it talks about how you're supposed to account for those leasing transactions. Once again, based on our review, there are no exceptions that we need to bring to your attention. Now, when we're performing procedures, one of the questions we're always asked is, how do we are utilizing data analytics? We actually use different tools to look into the transactions into your systems. Primarily, it allows us to look for gaps in sequence, determining if there are unusual transactions that were booked during the year, transactions that were booked at unusual times of the day or at unusual times of the week. And that's how we're able to identify high-risk transactions that we should be testing. There were no issues identified that require special attention during the course of the audit. We do have some comments for management, primarily in the area of IT, and they relate to the, these are recommendations that do not rise to the level of material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. However, they do fall as best practices based on what we see with other organizations. The details of that, of our recommendations are in a management letter, which is considered confidential information because they involve IT security. However, what we listed here are some of the key comments relating to formally establish IT policies and procedures that are written, approved, establishing formal IT risk assessment process and procedures, formalizing the password policy and optimize password security settings, improve controls over the administrator accounts. These are the as well as establishing a disaster recovery plan and regularly perform tests of the disaster recovery plans. That is something that is always very important, especially in today's environment, where organizations can be subject to cyber attacks. Now, something that I need to bring to your attention is the standard setters are coming up with new accounting policies and accounting standards. And the new standards that were implemented during fiscal year 23 has to deal with the GASB 96 and GASB 94 regarding the subscription-based information technology arrangements, as well as the public-private and I'm sorry, my eyesight is not working today, regarding partnerships and how they're accounted for. There will be new accounting pronouncements that are going to go into effect in fiscal year 2024. Our commitment is to provide the guidance necessary to properly implement these accounting standards to staff. Now, this brings me to the required communications by the auditing standards. And this is where I need to remind you that the financial statements are owned by management. Our responsibility is to render an opinion on the financial statements. We clearly define the roles of the auditee and the auditor in our engagement letter. We provided a letter to the board and management regarding the scope of the engagement. There were no controversial issues for which there was no authoritative guidance that was identified during the course of the audit. The basis of accounting for the financial statements is they were prepared under the assumption that the organization will continue as a going concern. There were no material audit adjustments that were made during the course of the audit that we need to bring to your attention. There were no disagreements with management over accounting or audit issues. It is okay to disagree, but if we ever do, we are required to bring them to your attention and explain to you the positions behind those issues. We're not aware of management having consulted with other accountants or auditors regarding any audit or accounting matters. The issue there is about opinion shopping. You don't want your management to be going around looking for the answer that they want. But once again, we're not aware of that having taken place. There were no conditions placed on us prior to being retained as your auditors. And this goes into the concept of independence and making sure that there are no conflicts while performing our audit procedures. We did not have any difficulties with management during the course of the audit. And this is about the collaboration that we get from management, about the availability of information. When we requested information from management, it was provided to us. We believe on a timely basis. We believe that we were giving complete access to your books and records, as well as to members of staff and board members when we perform our fraud interviews. There were no irregularities, fraud, or illegal acts that were identified during the course of the audit. I do need to remind you that a financial statement audit is not a forensic audit. We perform limited procedures, primarily in the form of inquiries of management, board members, and by also reviewing the information throughout the audit process. If we become aware of any fraud risks that are brought to our attention, any concerns regarding ethics, both of management as well as board members, we have to perform procedures to address those concerns. However, there were no issues brought to our attention, or there were no issues that were identified during the review of the documents that were provided to us during the course of the audit. I also need to remind you that at the end of the audit, management has signed a representation letter where they indicate that we have been given complete access to the true records of the organization. And that letter is signed at all levels, both by your general manager as well as your director of finance. I need to remind you in that we as a firm, as well as every individual that works for Desert Water, we are independent in accordance with government auditing standards. There are no conflicts and there are no matters that would have an impact on our ability to render an independent opinion on your financial statements. That brings to a conclusion my presentation, and we'd like to open it for questions.
Thank you. And Director Gracia, do you have any questions?
I'm reminded just by your appearance how comforting it is, the words that you spoke and the report that we read. When I was at Mission Springs, there were some questions about various financial controls, and as those questions continued to develop the day before, the night before the hearing that we're at right now, both the finance director and the auditor resigned and were never seen again. Here today, we have a completely different level of confidence in our situation at this water district. And I just wanted to point that out for those of you that might have an interest in knowing what's going on with the water district that serves me. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
I don't have any questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I think this is the most useful document that is ever presented at these meetings. Obviously, we are required to have an audit, but the thoroughness and the detail of your audit is I appreciate extremely. I also appreciate the management letter on the IT systems. I know that's been taken on board by staff. They're working to that. A lot of work yet to do. I just happened to notice just now that our non-operating revenue is larger than our operating revenue. So we are as much a financial organization now as we are a water agency, but that's a good thing. It's great to be in this position. So I appreciate your work. Thank you very much.
Vice President Bowman.
Thank you for your report, and I want to thank staff for following general accounting principles and for getting a sterling review.
Thank you. And I have nothing else to add to that other than to thank you again for being here today and also as our Vice President just mentioned moments ago, that the stellar report that our staff obviously was able to help with. And so with that, unless there are any other questions or comments from staff, we can move to the next agenda item. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. I seem to do that a lot. All right. I'll look for a motion then to approve the report as presented.
I move that we accept the report as presented with our thanks.
All right. I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. A first from Director Gracia and a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia.
Aye.
Director Bloomer.
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Aye.
Vice President Bowman.
Aye.
And President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right. Now we have item 6C, which is a request approval of procurement policy. Director Sines.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. Apologies, let me get to the right page here. Can we start the presentation? So the agency has been undergoing the process of really increasing our financial policies and their strength. And this is the next one on the list of policies that we are bringing to the board for review and approval. And to go through, And so we have the procurement policy for you. And in today's topics, we would like to go over the policy development process that we've gone through to get to this point today, as well as policy highlights and take any questions that you may have. Just take the mouse. I'll just take the mouse. Okay, so can we advance to the next slide? For the development of the policy, the policy was drafted by our purchasing department as well as myself. Then we took it to our department heads for review, as well as some key staff, because the goal of this policy was not to scrap everything that we've done in the past, but really to document everything that we currently do. We use internal procedures for the development of the policy, for the policy itself currently, but it is not a board approved policy. And then that went to management review, where Mark, Steve, and myself, we spent a couple of days going over the entire policy and really getting into the nooks and crannies of it to make sure that we agreed with everything that was in there. And then the next step was legal review and to the finance committee for review, and they supported bringing it to the full board. Next slide, please. So for the policy highlights, within this presentation, I have several different policy highlights that are called out, and many are direct excerpts from the policy itself and do not require much additional narration, but I am happy to review it with all the slides with you if you desire, but also I have selected a few key slides that I do believe require a bit more narration to them, and which I can present and open it up for questions. So would you like me to go through the entire presentation or just the highlights of the highlights?
I think we can go to the highlights, and if the directors have questions on specific items, they'll bring that up.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Can we go to slide 6, please? So for the purpose of this policy, it is required by California Government Code Section 54202, and it will serve as the agency's administrative procedure governing procurement activities. Currently, the agency uses an internal procedural document to govern our procurement activities. However, formal written policies are central to the strategic long-term approach to financial management. Financial policies define the boundaries for agency staff to operate within. It institutionalizes good financial management practices and also promotes stability and continuity within the agency's financial operations. This policy, as stated before, does not set out to change how the agency operates, but rather to document that, essentially that tribal information, that all of that information that is in our heads, and to document it, how the agency already operates for clear and consistent communication to staff. Slide 16, please. So with our contract execution authority is the next slide I would like to present to you. And included in the policy is a contract execution authority table, which provides the authorized limits for each agency position that is that will be authorized to enter into contracts on behalf of the agency. This is not something that we have had before and would like the board's feedback if the limits are acceptable. Management feels that these limits are appropriate for the agency. We have also taken a look at other entities in our area, other governmental entities, and have found that these levels are consistent with other practices. So that is something that I would like to, you can provide that along with your questions or now whether you feel that these levels are appropriate for the agency or if you'd like to see them modified.
I think we can ask the question now. If any directors have comments or concerns or additional feedback they'd like to provide to Director Sines about these levels. If so, let us know now. Otherwise, we can proceed.
Well, I do have a question. This authorizes these expenditures. Is there anything that requires that once that purchase takes place that it come back to the board?
No. So what these are is actual for the contract execution. So we have two different types of purchases. We have our goods and we have our services. For the goods, we have a table that clearly defines how those items are approved and what the authorization levels are up to. If it's already included in the budget, there's no additional authorization that is necessary because the funding has already been provided by the board for that purpose. When it comes to entering into contracts, it is a much different scenario because it is more of based off of the terms and the conditions, and we are engaging with an entity for services. And this is the level at which these positions are able to enter into that contract, whether it be $10,000 for department heads or $100,000 for the general manager. Anything over that we bring to the board of directors. Currently, we do not have any limits like this, but it is based off of professional judgment at the management level, what is being brought to the board of directors. So this would provide us that guidance and those guardrails that we can operate within. So really, we don't have to make that judgment call all the time.
The reason I ask is this set up a situation, and I only have one experience to draw from Mission Springs, where the general manager used his limit and went out and retained a public relations firm to smear this agency without board approval, and did considerable damage in the community and the confidence that people have in Mission Springs Water District as a result. I know that that wouldn't happen here. It never has. There's no indication of that. I have full confidence that our staff would, always do the right thing. I wished I could have the same confidence with my previous agency as I do here. So I don't have a problem with it, but we want to always keep an eye. It's unfortunate. I wished that over a certain amount that those contracts would come back to the board so we would know what was happening. I think that's part of what this is trying to catch up. I know there's discussion in here about another situation where you can hire professional services. Isn't it starting to lay some ground rules additionally for that work? I know that when we went through a year of hearings on the construction of the wastewater treatment plant, we were being advised by what I, at the time for a year, thought was an independent firm giving us independent information, professional guidance. And it turned out that he had a $3.5 million payday if he convinced the board to enter into that contract. And I found that to be repugnant. And I don't know if this would fix that. I think that it requires now disclosure. And if we had that, I think we would have had a different outcome in what appears to be, in my view, a $80 million stranded asset right in the middle of our district. And I think over time, we're going to need to unwind some of the truth about that. Some spaghetti of lies. So with that, I thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Bloomer.
I'm comfortable with the limits listed there.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the limits. I just wanted it to be understood by members of the board.
Yep.
I do have two other points. One is during our finance committee discussion, I mentioned rather than having insurance certificates, we asked to be additional insured on our suppliers' contracts. And that's because an additional insured can claim directly to the insurance company, rather than go the long way around. So that change did not make it into the document.
That is correct. The change has not been made into the document. Currently for our public works contracts, and those are, I believe, in section H, 7H of the policy, the agency requests that the agency be added as an additional insured on the contractor's insurance policy. So, but that isn't spelled out within the policy itself because we have a contract document that is reviewed annually. And that is where that contract requirement is spelled out and where it is, but we have not brought it down to lower level contracts where we do ask for just to be a certificate holder. So that's the way it's written based off of our current practices. However, we are currently working with our insurance agent, our Aqua JPIA, and we are developing a matrix of contract insurance requirements. So, I mean, that is within the works that we are developing that. But as it is right now, we have that included for our large public project works, not our lower dollar value and other types of contracts.
All right. And that, in fact, goes to my second question, which is you refer to a contract appendix, but there is no appendix in this document. So where does that document live in?
Contract appendix, where is that reference?
I'd just be looking for it again. It talks about a contract, it talks about appendix F.
Appendix F. There are many references back to the contract document, which is not attached as an appendix.
That's the problem. It refers to an appendix that's not here.
Yeah, Director McKenna, it may be referring to our public works contracts, which has a contract appendix, which outlines the insurance requirements, possibly.
Maybe it takes other comments and I'll look for it. But there is an issue here.
I've located it and it says detailed insurance. It's detailed insurance requirements can be found in the contract appendix, section 8, entitled bond insurance and endorsements or successor section. So yes, that is what Assistant General Manager had indicated. We are making reference back to the contract itself, and the contract has an appendix because we did not want to duplicate any sort of direction. So in the instance of public works projects, the contract is what governs that process. And we are just tying back to it and not restating or stating anything that is contradictory to that contract.
I'm not comfortable with that. If there's an appendix that governs how we issue a contract, and we're about to do that later today, then it's part of the procurement policy. It needs to be in the procurement policy. So if you refer to it, it should be in the document.
The reason why we have, the reason why we have addressed it this way, as stated, we did not want to create a competing policy or document when the contract governs a process. And that contract within the policy itself, there is another section that says the external reference documents can be updated from time to time. And that it's within this section, it indicates that there will be an annual review of the agency's public contract will be performed by the agency's engineering department and shall be updated as required. So again, it is making reference out to that contract that is updated on potentially on an annual basis. So it's just pointing back to that contract.
Still not happy. If it's governed by this policy, it needs to be copied in here. You can edit it separately, but it can't exist in isolation. If we have a procurement policy, it has to cover it. If it mentions it, it has to show it.
I could jump in. I don't know if this is going to make you feel any better about it, but just to make sure everyone else understands, the when you have a public works construction contract, it's a package of materials, and so there's several elements in the package. There's a notice inviting bids, a bid form, a short form of agreement, like 2 pages, and then general conditions, which are the most important. Well, a very important part of the contract because it includes a whole bunch of legal requirements. It's multiple pages. Then there's an appendix which includes the form of insurance that's required for that construction contract. And I think that's set forth in an appendix. And I think the appendix that sounds like the appendix that's mentioned in here is the appendix to that contract set, not an appendix to this policy.
And this policy should say it shall be governed by that appendix. It should be clear what it's about, and it isn't. You know.
Anything else?
That's it for me.
Okay. Vice President Bowman.
Notwithstanding this discussion, I appreciate the the authority that various department heads have. I appreciate the fact that you're codifying it and giving it a number. And I appreciate that work. I do have a concern that Director McKinnon, I think, needs an explanation that satisfies him. And I'm curious as to what that might be. Maybe there's a misunderstanding on his part or staff's part. I don't know. But I think it is worthy of explanation.
Would it be sufficient to add a line item in there within that section? That would be section 7H of the formal public bids for public project worked over $200,001 to state that this administration, that it shall be governed, public project works procurement shall be governed by the agency's contract with reference to the contract for the public project works.
On page 15, the detailed insurance requirements. Sorry. On page 15, it says detailed insurance requirements can be found in the contract appendix, section 8, entitled bond insurance and document. I think the problem is it doesn't really tell me what contract appendix means. I looked for it in this document thinking, well, it's an appendix. It'll be here. It isn't. It's somewhere else. But at least refer specifically, carefully to where else it is. You know, if this policy is going to be, this policy can require it from somewhere else, but we need to know where that is. And I think
it's in each contract, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So is the suggestion to revise that section to make it more clear that it is the agency's public works contract that has an appendix? So if we clarify that, is that what?
I'd like it to state specifically what the name of that document is, so that if I were looking for it, I would know where to look, and I could find it. At the moment, it's just too vague. You know, I think Mike had an answer, but I don't remember what you called that document. You said the public works contract.
When they go out to bid for a contract for construction, then there's an entire package that kind of makes it clear exactly what it is you have to sign. And so there's a notice inviting bids that gets published, and then there's a bid form that someone needs to fill out, identifying their bid amount for each bid item. Then there's a bond, a bid bond form that needs to be completed and submitted along with the bid. And then there's a form of agreement or contract, but that's only 2 pages. Because it's only 2 pages, it refers to general conditions. I guess in your set, it's called a contract appendix, isn't it?
That's correct.
But basically what they are general conditions, and it's probably 30 pages long or something like that with a whole bunch of legal stuff in there. And then And then in addition to that, there are bond forms that are provided to the bidder for the performance bond and the payment bond, which are required by law. And then there's insurance certificates. And in addition to the insurance certificate, there's an endorsement. And so the insurance certificate is on the agency's preferred form. Sometimes the insurance industry changes the form of certificate. And so they can't provide the form that we provide. We have to adjust and change our form to make it match what the industry is now doing. And then there's a form of endorsement that says the agency is added as an additional insured, for general liability insurance, general commercial liability of the contractor, that sort of thing. But I think in the contract set, in some contract sets, frankly, it's called general conditions. In your contract set, I think it's called contract appendix. And I think that's where
I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking, but this is the crux of this is that we need to be an additional insured rather than a certificate holder. Certificate holder is only told insurance exists and you'll be told if it's canceled. As an additional insured is a much stronger position to be in. And if it's not in our contract appendix, then it won't happen. But it will not do it. So is it in there or not? I can't tell. It's in the contract appendix, sorry.
It is a public works contract appendix.
Always or sometimes or.
I finally spotted the statements you're concerned about. It says detailed insurance requirements can be found in the contract appendix. And you're looking for that appendix as if it's an appendix.
I'm looking for assurance that we're going to be an additional insured rather than a certificate holder.
I see.
And I don't see it here.
We could change the policy to change
Just
that
add
language
that.
to say that the agency will be named as an additional insured insurance policy provided by the contractor.
Yeah, and we don't normally get down into that level of detail, but this is a policy question, and I think it should be clear what we want when we write the policy, and it's not clear.
So instead of renaming restating that section, which is section 7HX, to name out the contract, we can do that as well. We will make it more clear that the contract being referenced to the contract appendix, that it is the agency's public works contract appendix, as well as add an additional line to say that the agency will be named as an additional insured.
Yes.
Okay.
That would do it.
So this would actually be, if we were to take a vote on this today, then that would be part of the motion.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
Right. You wouldn't necessarily need to come back to us at a later time with this same conversation. Okay. Right. I think we can move on. Thank you.
Okay. And with that, there was no additional slides to go over with you. Those were the two main ones that I wanted to point out, but I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have in regards to the policy.
Okay. Thank you. We can start with Director Gracia.
I have no comment or question.
Okay. Thank you. Director Bloomer.
No further questions or comments.
Okay.
Thanks.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
No further comment.
Thank you. And Vice President Bowman.
None from me.
Okay, thank you. And I have no further questions. So with that, I'll look for a motion. Perhaps will be Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I move to accept the policy as amended.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. I have a first from Secretary Treasurer McKenna and a second from Vice President Bowman. Assistant Secretary Baca, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia.
Aye.
Director Bloomer.
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Aye.
Vice President Bowman.
Aye.
And President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So we may move now to 6D, which is request authorization for Finance Director to execute required documentation to apply for and administer funding from the State Water Board associated with the California Extended Water and Wastewater Arrearages Payment Program on behalf of Desert Water Agency. And that again is Director Sines.
I apologize for the mouthful. Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. As we all know, the COVID-19 public health emergency heavily impacted the financial well-being of many local residents and businesses here in the Coachella Valley, as well as beyond. In 2021, through $985 million in federal funding allocated to the state legislature, the State Water Board created the California Water and Wastewater Arrearage Payment Program. The funding originally covered water and wastewater debt from residential and commercial customers that accrued between March 4th, 2020 and June 15th, 2021. The agency has already applied for that program, and we received $206,061 of these funds and were applied to eligible customer accounts for the outstanding balances up to June 15th, 2021. On July 11th, 2023, Governor Newsom signed a budget trailer bill which expanded the arrearage program. This new extended program expands the relief period up until December 31st, 2022, and applications received by December 31st, 2023 are guaranteed funding. The agency is eligible to apply for funding on behalf of our customers. Now, these customers are both current and inactive customers. Our current customers, we still do have some current customers that have eligible amounts for this time period, even though it is about 12 months in the past because of our extended payment plan program that we implemented at that time when we reestablished our disconnections from service for non-payment. So we still have some outstanding balances. The majority of the balances come from customers who have already closed their account and they have been sent to collections. And so we will have the opportunity to pay off those collections for them for those eligible amounts that are included in that collection balance. So the balances that we will be applying for will be from June 16th, 2021 to December 31st, 2020. Customers are not eligible to apply directly to the program for funding, and the agency must do it on their behalf. Agency staff is currently preparing the program application for submission prior to the guaranteed funding deadline date of December 31st, 2023. For the fiscal impact, the agency may receive up to $61,981 in federal funds through this program. Staff recommends the Board of Directors authorize Finance Director signs to execute the required documentation to provide assurances, certifications, and commitments associated with the receipt and use of funding from the State Water Board in relation to the California Extended Water and Wastewater Arrearage Payment Program application. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Director Gracia, do you have any questions?
I do, and I apologize if we've been over this before. Let's take as an example the hearing that we had earlier. Individual, how long is he going to have, in his case, for instance, to catch up with his bill before you shut the water off for that August?
While an appeal is in process, we cannot turn off for non-payment.
Okay.
And once an appeal is finalized and there's no further actions that can be taken, and the action taken today ends the further action that any customer may take, there is a 3-month period, a 60-day period that they have to pay. Well, it's 60 days before it goes delinquent. And then when that becomes due, then they can be turned off for non-payment if they don't.
Does that kind of flow through all of these folks that might be behind in different?
It does flow through them. That is our normal procedure. However, we do have the opportunity for customers to sign up for a payment program of up to 12 months in any normal circumstance. Right now, we're kind of in normal circumstances, but back when the pandemic, when we were not turning off customers for non-payment, they accrued quite large balances. Right. And so the board at that time authorized us to offer an extended payment plan of up to, I believe it was 36 months, so that customers would have a much longer time to pay that back, to where they were not quadrupling the amount of payment during each month, but rather it kept it in more manageable, like $50 to $100 range payment. So we had thresholds of how far we would go out. And so that in that instance, but that extended payment plan wasn't forever. There was an end to the enrollment period, which was about 13 months ago, I believe. So, not 13 months ago. It was about 2 years ago that we stopped allowing people to enroll in that extended payment plan. But people, they can still enroll in that 12-month plan.
I appreciate it. And I'm glad to hear that there's a way for people to kind of come back into the system without, it can be overwhelming. You know, holiday times, all the things that come at people. And then suddenly their water's turned off because of something they did 3 months ago that they forgot they didn't, Anyway, I'm glad that that everybody gets a good shot at working things out. So thank you.
Director Bloomer,
No questions, thanks.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Just a question of information, really. On an average month, how many customers do we shut off?
I do not have that information available right now.
No, I can get that. I can't give you that information right now, but I believe this past week, I believe there were 8 accounts that were scheduled to be shut off, and our assistant administrative assistant who works for field services does a great job reaching out, contacting these individuals and advising them of the options that they have and so forth. So I think with those 8, I think only one we were scheduling to shut off after she was able to contact them. And this was last week.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Vice President Bowman.
None from me.
Thank you. None from me. So I'll look for a motion then to accept item 60 as presented.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for a second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you. So I have a first from Vice President Bowman, second from Director Bloomer, and may we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 6E, request board approval for budget augmentation and approval of revised classification and salary chart effective January 1st, 2024. And that's Ms. Hopping.
Thank you, President Ortega and members of the board. This staff report is created myself, Assistant General Manager Johnson, and Finance Director Sines, so there may be chiming in if necessary, if you have different questions. What we're looking to do today is we're doing a little bit of a restructure in our public outreach and conservation and water resources department. Right now, they're all under one umbrella, and we're looking to move them back under 3 so we can find a specific expert in that area versus trying to find someone who's good at 3 different things, because that's kind of a unicorn to try to find. So we're looking to have an outreach division with an outreach manager, or a public affairs manager, excuse me, a water resources manager, and a conservation manager. So we'll have 3 separate managers that can focus, and they'll all report directly to the assistant general manager. And then, so for that one, we're looking to fund that position, the public affairs manager position, the water resources manager. We're not looking to fill immediately, but we want to have that slot available when we're ready to put somebody in that slot. And then the other changes we're looking to make is we have an office assistant right now that is in the accounting department, but is being shared by the public affairs division to help process, and conservation to help process rebates. And we're looking to make that a full-time position. So that would require adding all the benefits that go along with that. And then the other change we have on here is our fleet mechanic foreman. It came to our attention that his salary range is a 43, and he's in the construction department, and all the other foremen in that construction department are 46. And he has taken on a lot more responsibilities with, like we had a CHP audit of all of our Class A drivers and our vehicles, and he took the lead with that. And we feel it's appropriate to bring his range up to that equal of his counterparts in the division. So to do all of those changes, the fiscal impact would be $165,400 for this fiscal year, and it'll be funded by the Reserve and Operations. For 2024-2025 budget, the cost would be $406,000, and finance director signs has reviewed the report. And the salary chart attached does reflect the changes, and those salary charts as presented have to be approved by the board per CalPERS regulations. So that's why whenever we make one of these changes, you'll see one of these charts attached. And it's effective January 1. You'll see at the top of the chart, the dates are reflected are December dates. And the reason why we do that is it's the pay period that includes January 1, just to make life easier for our payroll processing department. And I'll happy to answer any questions that you have regards to the changes.
Thank you. Director Grasha.
I do have one of these positions recently, wasn't there an ad you guys were hiring for fleet maintenance or something?
That was for a fleet mechanic.
A different
deal,
different position. Okay.
Yeah, that person, I just made a job offer.
Oh, good. How many new bodies is this ad?
Right now, it's just going to add one.
That's what I thought.
1.5.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Director Bloomer.
No questions.
And Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
No questions.
Okay. Vice President Bowman.
None from me.
Okay. So we're talking about ultimately, you said 1.5 at this point, but potentially 2.5 additional people, as well as the change in class for one existing employee.
Correct.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Unless there are any other questions, I'll look for a motion.
I move the item as presented.
Okay. Have first from Director Grasha. Look for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We can move to item 6F, request approval to award 2021-2022 pipeline replacement project. Finally, Mr. Tate.
Thank you, President Ortega and members of the board. On December 7th, the Desert Water Agency received 5 bids for the 21-22 replacement pipeline project. As shown on the table, Borden Excavating Incorporated submitted the lowest responsive bid for this project. Borden Excavating Incorporated's low bid is 13.9% lower than the next lowest bid from Downing Construction and 16% lower than the engineer's estimate. Borden Excavating is considered a capable contractor with a current Class A contractor's license number. In fact, he was awarded 8 of the last 10 pipeline projects. The budget amount for this work order is $5.67 million, including engineering, construction, and inspection. This project will install approximately 15,800 linear feet of ductile iron pipe and 610 linear feet of 12-inch ductile iron pipe. But the engineer's estimate for this construction project is $4.88 million. Borden Excavating Incorporated's is $780,000 under the engineer's estimate, with the estimated agency labor and material costs of $540,000. The total estimate for this project is $4.6 million. So the total is under the agency's approved budget. Finance Director Sands has reviewed this report. Staff recommends the Board of Directors approve the award of the contract for constructing of the 2021-2022 pipeline replacement project to Borden Excavating Incorporated in the amount of $4,099,247. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them now.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have some questions for Mr. Tate?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I have none.
Okay. Vice President Bowman.
And we have used these people several times recently.
They've done 8 of the last 10 projects, and they've all been very successful.
And how are they as far as keeping their cost and no overages or anything like that?
We have very low change orders.
Wonderful.
So that's something. They're a very efficient contractor, and we put out a good set of plans. They know our plans are good. They're efficient. It works out well for all of us.
Nice. Thank you.
Can you remind me of where this is actually happening? I saw it at the top of the report, but now we have a map. Great. Okay. Right. We've seen this before. And once the, assuming that we make the agreement today, when would it be begin, do you think?
That one's a little bit hard to pin down. So from what I've heard, ductile iron pipe is readily available. 8-inch valves, gate valves, things like that are readily available. Right now, the long lead item is brass. So angle stops, corp stops, any brass elbows or fittings or anything like that. And from what I've heard, that's like 10 months. So and we can't do anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to start until we get that. So it could be up to 10 months.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll look for a motion to accept as presented.
Move the recommended action.
Thank you very much. I'll look for a second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a first from Director Gracia, a second from Director Bloomer. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Item 6G, request authorization for general manager to enter into license agreement with the Department of Water Resources for construction, installation, operation, and maintenance of water quality monitoring wells on 2 DWA-owned properties. And that's Ms. Rapola. Thank you.
Thank you, President Ortega and members of the board. Pursuant to Chapter 7 of the California Water Code, the state shall provide in-kind and subcontracted technical services for investigating and gathering data on groundwater conditions in groundwater basins throughout California. The program is called Technical Support Services, and it's really meant to assist GSAs like the Desert Water Agency develop and implement our groundwater sustainability plans. And there's a number of ways in which they assist these agencies, one of them being construction and installation of monitoring wells such as these. There were multiple locations within Desert Water Agency's service area identified as having limited groundwater data in the shallow aquifer. DWA, along with other GSAs, both in the Indio Subbasin and the Mission Creek Subbasin, submitted an application along with well service requests through the TSS program. And the Department of Water Resources approved 2 DWA-owned properties for participation in this program and construction of water quality monitoring wells that will help fill that data gap in the shallow aquifer. Upon authorization by the board to enter into this license agreement, DWR will construct and install monitoring wells along with any necessary monitoring equipment on each of the 2 DWA-owned properties in the Indio Subbasin. We do have a third property in the, or not that we own, but there is a third well in the Mission Creek Subbasin that we will present to you at a later date. Upon completion of drilling and developing these wells, DWA staff would own, operate, maintain, and repair as needed the monitoring wells. We would also obtain data from these wells that will include water level, water quality, and water temperature. This data will be used to help implement our groundwater sustainability plan, as well as our salt and nutrient management plan. In terms of fiscal impact, we did budget $69,000 for fiscal year 23 and 24 for construction of these wells. Again, 2 in the Indio Subbasin and 1 in the Mission Creek Subbasin. These funds are meant to take care of any permits or other documentation that we need to file, as well as any work that DWA might need to do for construction. Not construction, but installation of any sort of equipment that may be needed. for these wells. We also would need to complete setup of our SCADA to bring the information into the office. Legal counsel has reviewed the license agreement, and staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to enter into a license agreement with DWR for construction, installation, operation, and maintenance of water quality monitoring wells on our 2 DWA-owned properties. And at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Grasha.
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the report.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Bloomer.
No questions.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
No, excuse me, no questions.
And Vice President Bowman.
None from me.
I'm just curious. So where are these wells actually? Are they located? I mean, you said the Indio Subbasin.
Of course. So the first well is located at the end of Sunrise Way. Desert Water Agency owns technically 2 parcels that are adjacent to each other. That's really right next door to the Four Seasons properties. I'm not sure if you're familiar with where those are. So that would be the first one. And the reason why that site was selected is because it is downstream of recharge, as well as being adjacent to urban communities. The other location is just north of the Dream Homes. We have an existing parcel adjacent to the wash. So the reason that that location is ideal is its central location within the basin in general, as well as being near golf courses, airports, and recycled water use, which are all factors that they're interested in and how they affect the groundwater.
Thank you.
You're
Very
welcome.
interesting. All right. So I'll look for a motion to accept as recommended.
So move.
Thank you. And I'll look for a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. So I have a first from Director Grasha and a second from Vice President Bowman. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now on to the last of our action items, 6H. Request approval to file notice of exemption for drilling, equipping, and maintaining water quality monitor wells on 2 DWA-owned properties. And again, Ms. Rapola, thank you.
Thank you, President Ortega, members of the board. I don't need to reiterate the first 2 paragraphs because it's essentially the same as what we just went over. So in terms of constructing these monitoring wells, we do need to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act. Part of that is filing notice of exemptions for construction of these 2 wells. These sites are categorically exempt through Class 3, which is new construction of small structures, as well as Class 6, information collection. With a board approval today, the staff will file 1 notice of exemption for each property within Riverside County. And filing of these notice of exemptions will begin the 35-day statute of limitations on legal challenges to the agency's approval of this project under CEQA. Again, in terms of fiscal impact, this falls under that same $69,000 budget that we just talked about, which is meant to cover the cost of filing any sort of documentation, applying for permits and things that we need. And staff's recommendation would be that the board approve staff to file 1 notice of exemption for each site for construction, installation, operation, and maintenance of water quality wells on each of the 2 DWA-owned properties. And at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer,
No questions. Thank you.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
No questions.
Thank you. And Vice President Bowman.
None.
Thank you. I have none. So I'll look for a motion to approve as presented.
So move.
Thank you. And I'll look for a second.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a first from Director Grasha, a second from Vice President Bowman. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we can move to item number 7, which is the general manager's report. Mr. Johnson, please.
Thank you. Thank you, President Ortega. The first item on the report here, so the agency was recognized by Aqua JPIA for our loss ratio of 20% or less. And we received the President's Special Recognition Award for that. And I think we get this almost every time it's awarded. So just wanted to recognize that, let the board know that we received that at the Aqua conference. Next, we have Department of Water Resources released the final EIR report for the Delta Conveyance Project. So this was on December 8th. DWR released the final EIR for the DCP project. And the project is key to California's water resilience portfolio and Governor Newsom's water supply strategy. And this action is the last step DWR is required to take under CEQA prior to deciding whether to certify the EIR and approve the proposed project. And once DWR certifies the final EIR, DWR will use it to help determine whether to approve the proposed project, an alternative or no project at all. And as you all know, the agency is heavily invested in this project. Happy to see that this is coming to this state. It's taken a long time to get to this point. So we'll see where it goes. Again, we are celebrating Christmas and New Year holidays. We'll be closed on Monday, the 25th and Tuesday, the 26th. And then again, we will be closed on Monday, the July 1st for New Year's. And the final item here is our system leak data report. We have, again, Caballeros on the top of the list here. We are anticipating that project to start next month. So that's great. There are a couple that are on this list, Luella and Andreas, that are on the project that was just awarded today. So hopefully those will be coming off soon if we can get the material on there. And just wanted to highlight some human resource meetings. Ms. Hopping, is if there's any highlights that you want to point out?
Yeah, I attended the BB&K annual labor and employment law update. And of course, there's going to be more changes we need to post. I already have many labor posters ready to go. And then there's changes to the marijuana testing allowance. But most of that, we are exempt from the changes because we do have safety sensitive positions and we have our contract. So we're still good with our current processes. And then the only other really item of note is that we did the interviews for our open equipment operator, fleet mechanic, and engineer. And so far the fleet mechanic and the equipment operator have accepted. So we're working them through the process and I'm going to be making a job offer hopefully today. So we're moving forward. Hopefully we'll be back to full staff soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ms. Hopping. And I should note the engineer, since General Manager Krause is leaving, he is our engineer. A new engineer will be hired. And then the next activities here are some highlights, a lot of tribal mediation. We had meetings on the 7th and 8th, and the principals had their meeting on the 11th. Mission Creek Subbasin quarterly GM meeting was held on the 12th. We had our Conservation and Public Affairs Committee meeting on the 18th. And then also that same day, another tribal mediation. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Director Gracia, do you have any questions for Mr.
No
Johnson?
questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director
No
Bloom?
questions.
Okay. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
No questions.
No?
Sorry, no questions.
Okay. Vice President Bowman?
None.
Thank you. And neither do I. So thank you very much. We can move now to item 8. This would be director's reports on meetings and events attended on behalf of the agency. So please remember to state the event and the date. And with that, I'll ask Director Grasha to start.
Killing time, killing time. On Tuesday, the 7th, I attended the Desert Valley Builders Association luncheon. And I don't have any notes on that. And then on the 12th through the 15th, I attended the Colorado River Water Users Association. I believe we were all there, and picked up some interesting information, and thought it was relatively helpful. Thanks.
Okay, Director Bloomer.
I was also at the CRUA conference last week, the 12th through the 15th. It was really nice to hear all the different perspectives of all the different types of users and geographical users from all over the basin, including Mexico and Colorado River Indian tribal group, and a really good panel on farming along the river and in the different areas, what everyone's doing to conserve. And it was very well attended. I think they had 1,700 people in attendance. Was also lucky enough to go on the tour of the Hoover Dam on Wednesday morning. It was a great morning out there, and I think there was more water in Lake Mead than the last time that we were there on a tour. So it was a good conference and good trip. So, and that's it.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Since the last meeting, I attended Desert Hot Springs City Council on December 5th. And at your suggestion, President Ortega, I extended an invitation to the council members to tour our facilities, and one of them has accepted. So we're organizing that for him.
Fantastic.
I went to Las Vegas with everybody else on December 12th through 15th for the Colorado River Users Association. There was a little optimism to be found at that when the 6 states and the federal government agreed how to allocate water for the next couple of years until 2026. I think it was lubricated by a big injection of federal money.
Yeah.
So agreement was found.
Everybody was happy.
I realize that when 2026 rolls along and that 100-year agreement expires, when it was originally passed, Mexico wasn't much interested in what happened with the water. There were no Native American representatives involved because they just became citizens 2 years before. When 2026 rolls around, there are going to be two countries, 6 states, and 30 tribes asking for a share of the Colorado River water, and all of them want more than they currently get. So I can't imagine how much federal money it would take to make an agreement work on that one. But there's a really big challenge ahead for Colorado River. Now, we get our entitlement to water from the State Water Project, but we get the actual water from the Colorado River. So we need to be watching what's happening there too. We're not even going to be at the table, but we have a vital interest there. I'm not optimistic that, the news will be good, but we shall see. That's all I say on that.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Yes, I attended 2 tribal meetings, one by Zoom and one in person. Was a long morning on the 11th that we met, but it was a good discussion that we had with the tribe, and we'll bring more in our closed session. I also attended CRUA, first time ever. Been to many other things, but never to the CRUA, and I was impressed with the amount of people that were there, and as has been stated already, how many people rely on the Colorado River and who have dipped a straw into it. One of the presentations that I attended that I felt was significant was at the end of day was a photographer had taken some shots of life on the river. And he started by going all the way to the source, way up in the Rockies, where you can literally just walk across the stream that becomes the Colorado River. And what was particularly poignant to me is he had a slide, and I wish I could throw it up on our screen. It looked like a human lung with an intake and then all the little vegetables going down into the lung and just to be able to breathe. And his picture was of the Colorado River. He reversed the water flow and it looked like a lung. And it was poignant to me because where that water is, there's life. And he had a statement that I wrote down. We often view the river as a resource. He says, no, the river is a life force, not just a resource. And I thought that was incredibly poignant. It was a great time, and I appreciate going.
Thank you. I also attended the CRUA conference from the 12th to the 15th in Las Vegas. I'm really glad that we were there. Even though, as Director or Secretary Treasurer McKenna has pointed out, we don't have a direct spot at the table, I think it's incredibly important for us to understand at least what's happening. We've been to a lot of conferences the last year. There always seems to be some reference to the Colorado River. There always seems to be some panel about the Colorado River, but that's usually about 45 minutes of what might be a 3-day conference, and this being a conference solely focused on the Colorado River, I felt was very important. There was a lot more information, a lot of things that I had never even considered or really thought about too much. And I'll just correct you, Secretary Treasurer McKenna, it's actually 7 states, not 6 states, that are part of this arrangement. So it gets even more complicated, and our own state being one of them. This compact ends at the end of 2026. That gives the representatives 3 years to figure it out. I am perhaps a little bit more optimistic than Secretary Treasurer McKenna, but I certainly don't envy any of the people who are going to be sitting at that table. And the table has expanded quite significantly since the compact was first agreed to in 1922. And even with some of the more recent amendments within the last 20 years. For one, it does include Mexico at the table since I think 1944, and maybe even more importantly and more impressively, includes tribal nations for the first time. Really, for the first time, I think this conference, what I heard several times was that it was really the first CRUA conference where there was a large representation, a much larger representation of sovereign nations, and that was quite obvious in the auditorium, and also not just with people sitting in the auditorium, but also with people on panels, and that was I did not realize quite how many tribes, for example, are in the Colorado Basin. Apparently, there are 30. Vice President Bowman and I did sit next to each other at one point in the auditorium, and we noted there was a long line of flags on the stage. We couldn't find California, so thanks to Vice President Bowman, he went to correct that late out at the end of that session, because the way it was folded, you could not tell that it was from California. But in addition to the flag of the United States and the United States of Mexico, we also had the 7 states that are part of the Colorado Compact, and 10 nations who have at this point, I guess, been part of that discussion. So as far as what's going to happen after 2026. Most of the conversation seemed to be, there were many comments made by people on panels about how cooperation was going to be key, that this was going to be something where cooperation was going to be vital. We heard that refrain quite frequently. And I think more than one panelist made a statement along the lines of, there are 3 ways to solve this. One is litigation, but we don't want to do that, or we don't think we want to do that. The next is is legislation, which is a possibility. I mean, I presume that to be legislation coming from the federal government, or cooperation, and the emphasis kept coming back to cooperation. However, one panel that I sat in on, which was the representative from each one of the 7 states sitting on a panel, and it was they tried not to pit it as the upper basin versus the lower basin, but that's kind of what it became. And most particularly, the representative from Colorado was adamant that she and her state were not going to accept any more cuts. So back to your point, Secretary Treasurer McKenna, it's going to be a very tough 3 years ahead. I don't envy the role of any of those people. That is going to be a very, very tough sell, regardless whether it's California or in Colorado or any of the other 5 states. And with that, we will close this meeting of the open part of the meeting. Oh, we've got director's remarks. Thank you. All right, so I will finish that and we'll move to item number 9, which is director's comments and requests. And we'll start with Director Gracia.
Thank you. Just wanted to point out the citizen Paul who spoke earlier spoke about some issues that he's been exploring on terms of sewage wastewater facilities in his neighborhood, which is North Palm Springs and north of the freeway. He's dug up information that I didn't have. You know, when I was on the board over at Mission Springs, I was led to believe that Mission Springs with the new wastewater plant would be providing wastewater services to the entire industrial development north of the I-10. That was the big sell. It turns out that there never really was any plan for that happening, and that that it was always going to be Palm Springs that was going to supply that service. I made the motion to build that plant based on the information I was provided. And now with this bridge issue that they've received a lot of funding for, 50 million, I believe. The city is saying that they're going to be able to put in the main as part of that project, part of that 50 million. I don't know how far it comes, how close it gets, but I understand that the plant here is at its capacity. It raises more questions than answers, and I'm trying to relay the frustration of some members of the community and myself for sure, and would like at some point to try to untangle that and figure out exactly. To me, it's a time bomb. You know, putting that plant where they did may at some point in the future be looked back on as a smart move. However, I don't know when that might happen. Essentially, what they're doing is going to be bringing from the one neighborhood that's already connected to the existing facility up there down and dumping it essentially in our neighborhood or processing it there. So it's a frustration, and at some point in the future, I'd like to explore what really is happening over there and how we're going to build a 2.5 million square foot warehouse that's going to be, I guess, operating on a batch plant after spending unknown tens of millions. You know, I think it's $80 million at this point to build a wastewater treatment plant literally right next door. And it's a responsibility that we have at this district to know what's going on up there, because it affects us. That stuff flows directly toward you, and we have a right to know what's going on. With that, I say thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
No comments or requests, thanks.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
I forgot to mention, under attendances that I zoomed into the Mission Springs Water District meeting yesterday, and they elected new officers. Ivan Sewell will be president next year, and Director Griffin will be vice president. There was one comment made by Director Duff, and this we need to look into. She has requested, via stating it publicly at the meeting, some explanation for the way we charge for groundwater replenishment in when we send a bill to Mission Springs. She's done some simple, perhaps erroneous mathematics, thinks that they are now paying $400 an acre foot for replenishment. And she did that by taking the charge and dividing it by what was actually provided. And she is looking for an explanation for that. So I think we should be prepared for that question. We should answer that question, how we do it and why we do it. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that. All right, Vice President Bowman.
Well, a year ago, we were not here, three of us. And we've had quite a year. I want to thank staff for incorporating the new directors into the role here at DWA. It's been a privilege to work with everybody and to get some things done. I appreciate what the staff has done to continue to improve DWA and incorporate us new people here. Appreciate Paul and Kristen, your influence, your knowledge about the district, and helping us all out. And I wish happy holidays to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other further requests. I'll just echo Vice President Bowman's happy holidays for staff and for fellow board members, wishing you safe travels if that takes you away from here during the holidays. And I look forward to meeting here again in the new year with a very large agenda ahead of us, but I'm confident that we can address many important issues in the coming year. And with that, we will adjourn and meet again at 10 o'clock in the conference room for closed session. Thank you. So welcome back to open session. I can report that we have no actionable items from closed session to talk about here at this moment, so we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy holidays. See you next year.